This UN map shows in red the 29 countries that have closed all schools because of COVID-19. The ones in blue are partially closed, and the disruption is far from over. This month, 258 million children have been unable to attend school because of the closures. While children in more developed parts of the world have been able to continue classes remotely, many without access to computers or the internet have been unable to learn. UN Chief Antonio Guterres marked the International Day of Education on Sunday, saying it's a fundamental right that must be protected to avert a catastrophe. Sonia Gallego reports.
A school year unlike any other they've known. Staggered classes, mandatory hand sanitizing, and of course one vital piece of uniform, the face mask. But when the number of infections in any given area becomes overwhelming, they too are forced to close. Students then left at the mercy of their home circumstances, especially those from households where parents are still going out to work.
I'm a mother and I also have a job to do, so I'm worried about leaving my kid alone at home during the pandemic. I don't know if she will eat on time and study by herself. Staying at home alone without the company of her friends may also cause some psychological problems, and I feel sad about this.
With parents taking on the role of educators, juggling their work and teaching has left many fearing for their children's futures. Digital learning has taken over the classroom. But for those who have children with special learning needs, that can mean an extra expense on already strained household budgets.
I have a child who needs a special assistance. He has autism. He needs special assistance and special school. 1 day per week is not enough for him. He is in a 3rd grade. He doesn't know how to read, write or spell.
The economic fallout of the pandemic has had far-reaching consequences for children around the world. As well as losing out on their education, many are being forced prematurely into work in order to support families.
Every day when I come back home, my hands smell like gas. I take a shower, have a meal, sit with my father and then go to sleep. I go to work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I work for 12 hours. I do not want the corona pandemic to affect my studies, as I want to finish them, to become a pilot and make my dream come true.
Educational experts predict that 10 million of the world's most vulnerable children will fail to return to school. And they're urging the international community to do all that is possible to prevent more lives from being disrupted and to get educators vaccinated faster so schools can open sooner rather than later.
The education community has understood much more the role that teachers play, which is not just the role of instruction and transmitting knowledge. It's their role as essentially leaders in their communities. And many teachers around the world have really done the most they could to keep in touch with the students, especially the most disadvantaged. And that's something we should be really cherishing.
The pandemic may have exposed the inequalities in education systems around the world, but also the role that educators have in students' lives, which goes beyond just teaching. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera.
We'll speak more about this with child psychologist Catherine Hallisey. She joins us from Cork in Ireland by Skype. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. So what would you say were the main psychological effects for children of these school closures?
You know, it's not the same psychological effect for every child. As you heard in the report, there are wide differences depending on poverty and even gender. So at a very basic level, the loss of structure and routine has a huge impact on children's psychological well-being. The loss of seeing their friends, the loss of key people in their lives, their teachers. And it's important to remember that teachers are the first line of defense in terms of safeguarding against neglect and abuse. So there are so many aspects of this, from beginning with social learning and right up to protecting against neglect and abuse.
And you talk to people around the world about this. What sort of things are they telling you about the risks that they're highlighting from the closures?
Well, within South Africa, the schools have remained closed for an extended period of time. And for many children, their attending school is the one place where they can access a meal. So they may be at home now, their parents may be either unemployed or still going out to work. So you can either have financial hardship or lack of supervision. There's lack of access to electricity for hours at a time, lack of access to devices and internet. So the education is extremely patchy. And what it's doing is it's taking any disadvantage or vulnerability that was already within a family and just magnifying it many times over. If you look at Yemen, schools were closed for quite some time, and after the first wave, schools began to reopen in October. And what we're seeing are huge overcrowding within classrooms. Many children didn't return, so for many children, this is a premature end to their education. We have increases in domestic violence, substance abuse, gender-based violence, sexual abuse, and early child marriage and child labour. So there are huge extremes.
Now, clearly, as you say, there's a kind of a difference between outcomes depending on what people's background is. But are there things that parents can do, regardless of their income, that might help children get through this period?
Yes, definitely. So the biggest protective factor in any child's life is their relationship with their parent. So there is no money involved in this. This is simply the bond between parent and child, the parent-child interaction. So there are very many practical things that we can do to support children. So providing structure and routine, time for play, time for connection, time outside to protect mental and physical health, exercise, and just really trying to be together as a family and fostering a sense of normality. And, you know, we can either amplify the panic and stress that many of us feel, or we can choose to really try and keep things as calm and relaxed as possible at home. And they are big protective factors for children's mental health.
Now, you talked about some of the detrimental effects that the pandemic has had on children's education. Do you see any glimmers of hope? Is there anything during the pandemic in terms of education that's actually been positive at all?
Well, what has been really wonderful is to see the adaptability of many schools, many teachers. And for very many children, they have adapted really well to remote learning. And there are some families I work with who their children are thriving. They are spending more time at home. They are seeing their parents more. There is reduced stress and pressure, and people's schedules are much calmer and fewer activities, leaving more time for play and exploration, that free play and exploration, which we know is really positive for mental health.